Tru4Athletes Cannabis Education Series presented by Trulieve. This one is about performance, fitness, and cannabis. We've got an awesome panel today. Joining us is Angelina Blessed. She's an A4C athlete ambassador. She's a Muay Thai fighter, and she's founder of Blessed Edibles. We've got Dr. Joshua Moore. He's a favorite of these series. He's been to 2 or 3 of them. Dr. Moore is back, and he's going to contribute his expertise as he always does. And we also have Mike James, former NFL player, a buddy of mine, A4C athlete ambassador, first NFL player to ever file for a therapeutic use exemption specifically for cannabis, and that's called a TUE. We're going to talk to him in depth about that. But I wanted to get things started on this panel and talk about my experience with cannabis and recovery specifically. And we're going to get into cannabis and performance as well and fitness. But for me, growing up, of course, cannabis is illegal. It's a no-no. You're not supposed to tell anybody you're doing it. So in high school, when I discovered it, it was a secret. It was a secret. And, it was between me and my friends, the people who were doing it. And other than that, we're just trying to get away with it. And I never really saw it as something that was helping me athletically or helping me recover, even though I was a dedicated athlete. It wasn't until I got to college and I was playing football in college and I suffered a pretty severe cracked rib that was super duper painful. Had a hard time just doing anything, breathing, laughing, eating, anything. I was bedridden. And I decided to consume a little bit of cannabis, not a lot, just a little bit. And it offered me an enormous amount of relief right off the bat. And it really opened my eyes to what cannabis was capable of. It wasn't just this illegal drug that I was, afraid of getting caught for using. It was something that could actually aid me in my athletic career. I ended up, making it to the NFL. I had a 6-year NFL career, tons of injuries. And the front half of my career, I used the pills. I used the pills that they gave me. I used the opioids. I used all the anti-inflammatories. I was an obedient soldier. And it wasn't until the back end of my career that I started to realize, wait a second, there's something else that works better for me. It's that thing I was doing in college that helped me with that rib injury. And I started moving away from the pills and toward the cannabis for recovery. And what do you know? I started recovering better, started recovering faster, didn't need the anti-inflammatories, slept better, was ahead of schedule with my trainers. And that's when I kind of realized, okay, there's more to it than they've been telling us. And so, Angelina, I want to start with you. How did you first realize that, because you're a fighter, so you're doing combat sports, you're getting beat up, you're beating up other people. When and how did you first realize that cannabis could aid you in your recovery from these kind of combat situations?
I was a really good girl. So I had quit my partying a long time ago, and then I started doing Muay Thai. Now, it was almost 10 years into my Muay Thai career that the pain started really building up. So it was then I was watching all the other guys, and so they were all going outside and smoking weed, and I had that old stigma in my head after cleaning myself up from my partying days. I'm like, well, I didn't understand why they were smoking weed, but they were still going out and going for their runs, and they would clinch and they would spar, and they were getting all their training done. So after my injuries really started to compile, I spoke to my doctor about it, and like you, they were trying to give me all the pills as well, but I fought them on it. And I just finally decided one day just to try smoking weed and to see kind of what would happen. Now, the effects were almost instantaneous with myself, where it just started to work for me. It went from starting to sleep a little better. It started to improve my cortisol level issues. But myself, I really know that I didn't want to smoke. So I started to make butters and oils and just started to share these little cookies that I made with the people in the gym. And everything really started to change for me from that point. The body soreness went away. I also added things like sensory deprivation tanks and stuff into it as well, just to really give my body the rest that it needed. But that combined with cannabis made a massive difference in my life, physical and mental health. Absolutely.
Doctor, can you tell us why it helps in recovery, why it helps you sleep? Because both Angelina and myself just said, hey, when we used it, when we're dealing with an injury, it actually helps you rest. It helps you sleep. And of course, sleep is when you heal. So why does it help you sleep?
Yeah, so just to give a little bit of the science behind all of this, cannabis, cannabinoids, whether we're talking phytocannabinoids, the ones that come from the plant, or endocannabinoids, the ones that we make ourselves, they affect our endocannabinoid system. And the endocannabinoid system is such an important system in our body. Everybody's familiar with the skeletal system and the immune system and the nervous system. But the endocannabinoid system is kind of like the system that governs all of those others. It kind of modulates all of them to, either tune things up a little bit, tune things down, make minor corrections to get us from, off center back to homeostasis, right? So that's the reason why it's so effective on so many different things, whether it's pain, sleep, everything, because the system that it affects is in contact with every tissue of our body, every part of our body. So when we're talking about things like improving sleep, there are obviously anxiety reducing properties to cannabinoids, both CBD and THC. So sometimes, just helping to kind of calm the mind down, slow the mind down a little bit. If you've had a great indica strain, the feeling of that, when it starts to sit on you, it's like, okay, it's time to get to bed right now. And that's the body's, that's the cannabinoids interaction with our endocannabinoid system. And then our endocannabinoid system saying, it's time to rest. Let's start to turn it down, nervous system. Let's start to just ease out and relax a little bit so we can get some sleep and get some recovery.
So that endocannabinoid system is activated when you use cannabis. How long does it stay open and activated? Do you have to use it every day to get the benefits of cannabis?
No, you don't have to use it every day. I have a lot of, so in our office at Dr. Damas Wellness, I was actually trying to get Damas in here because being a former NFL athlete also, he can speak to things in a different way that I can, but a lot of our patients are former NFL athletes, and they're using cannabis to most of them are still very active people. They're golfing, they're doing even like charity sporting events and things like that. So they're also using it for recovery. Man, I I went off on a tangent. I forgot your actual question.
The question was like, so for sleep for example,
Sleep,
I mean, you talked about cannabis being great for sleep. Like you're on, you take an indica strain, you realize it's time to go to bed. Is that going to help you the next night as well, fall asleep? Or
right. Great. So yeah. So as far as there are certain things that the longer you so cannabis, especially CBD, is a great anti-inflammatory. And when you're taking an anti-inflammatory, it is it's not just an analgesic. It's not just a pain reliever. It's actually kind of modulating your immune system to kind of turn down the level of inflammation that's happening. So for a sports injury, which is part of the inflammatory process, taking an anti-inflammatory daily or multiple times a day is going to help you recover much, much quicker. For something, so the amount of time that your body gets the positive benefits from cannabis, it kind of depends on which route of administration. All right. So if you're taking an edible, for example, you can expect to have those effects for 4, 6, maybe even 8 hours. If you're smoking it, it might be a little bit less. So I definitely encourage people to, try, if you have your medical card, try all of the different ways and find what works best for you.
One more question for you about this. Do you, if you use it every day, do you lose the ability to self-modulate without it?
We're not seeing that, like any compound, anything, any substance that makes you feel good does have a bit of a risk of, habituation. Certainly we do see that if you're using it chronically, you may have to use higher doses in order to get the same effect. But it's not like the way to fix that is you can abstain for a day or 2 or 3, and you get right back to the level that you were before. And cannabis is one of those medications or substances that if you do abstain from it, you're not at risk of withdrawals. Like if you're taking a pain medication like an opioid and you stop taking it, you're gonna feel pretty awful. Your body kind of builds up a tolerance to it, and you don't really see that with cannabis.
Yeah, myself, I've taken plenty of opioids over the years, and especially later in my career, I had some significant injuries, had a couple surgeries, and literally 2 days of taking just a couple of opioids. On day 3, when I decided not to, I was actually withdrawing from 2 days of like 2 opioids per day. Mike, you've got a lot of experience with pain, with cannabis, with opioids. Can you talk a little bit about your realization that cannabis was going to aid you in your recovery from your football injuries?
Well, it came pretty quick in my career. I never used cannabis throughout my life. I only drank and, had fun, like any other kid. And when I got to the NFL, I broke my ankle my rookie year. And shortly after that, I developed a dependency on opiates. It was my first time ever experiencing that. It was my first time ever even having surgery. So I didn't know what the road to recovery was going to be like. So shortly after that dependency, I found cannabis and I used it strictly for medical purposes for the next few years. And, throughout the next couple of years, it really aided me in my recovery, really helped with inflammation and really helped me mentally as well, deal with the anxiety of the game. I think that's something that's less spoken about, is how anxiety driven the game is. So after I found cannabis, it aided in my health. And like you said earlier, I put in a therapy user exemption for the league to recognize it as a medicine. That petition was, turned down, but the program now and the policy now has changed and moved to date. I'm looking for the NFL to put in some form of a wellness program for it to be recognized and athletes to be able to have an opportunity to be able to use this medicine properly and to be educated on it properly. But it helped me tremendously, being able to wean me off of opiates and give me a medicine now that I can use to be able to do my job at a high level. And shortly after that, I retired and now got into cannabis as the vice president of Lion Order by Rohan Marley, and it's been well.
So when they denied your therapeutic use exemption, what did they say? Did they give you an explanation? Did they actually even address it substantively, or were they just like, no, it's not part of the policy, we can't accept it?
Well, short answer, it's not part of the policy. That's what it came down to in the workplace. Secondly, this medicine is not recognized federally legally in a legal manner. So, according, from state to state, it changes. So the league didn't want to recognize it that way as well. But, what I was asking for it to be done, for it to be taken out the banned substance list. I felt like, at least guys shouldn't be, if they weren't going to recognize it in the proper fashion, then at least guys shouldn't be punished and suspended and fined for something that's aiding in their health.
Yeah, and I think you were instrumental in helping the NFL change their policy. They didn't take it all the way off the banned substance list, but with the effort of guys like you, they're able to kind of soften their stance and open their mind. They're still waiting for the data, though, right? We don't have scientific hard data, and I think that's the only thing holding it back. And cannabis is a tough substance to study, right? It's because everybody's different, every strain is different. You can consume, the same type of cannabis one night, feel one way, and then the same thing the next night and feel totally different. Why is that? There's a lot of mystery around cannabis, and I think that's what makes it special. Angelina, we talked about
hold on, Nate. I'm not gonna let you downplay yourself. You, Eben, Eugene, amongst other guys, played such an instrumental role in putting me in a position to be able to do that. So thank you, man.
Hey, man, it was a cool movement. We were all kind of singing the same song, talking about what was true for us. And I think that's what's cool about the cannabis movement, is it's about truth. It's about personal anecdotal truth, which is what's important to share alongside of the data that's going to come, because it's a human conversation here. This is about pain. This is about, like you said, anxiety. We're human beings, and we got to treat each other right. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, man, for sure.
Angelina, we talked about recovery to start. And I want to talk a little bit about maybe, using cannabis in advance of training or competing, and how that affects your performance, how that affects your fitness level, your hand-eye coordination. Do you have any experience consuming some of these blessed edibles before you go out and train?
Well, there was kind of it was a bit of a process to get there, because if you had asked me a few years ago if I would have done that, I never would have. I was strictly using it for like go home, shut the body pain off, get in the tub, go to bed, right? So now there's a couple different ways that it happened. I had ingested a large amount of edibles the night before and then tried to go to the gym first thing in the morning. Now, sometimes, you're a little bit foggy. But as we know, and maybe Dr. Joshua could speak on it, but from what I know, THC is stored in your fat cells. So as I start my morning skip, I would start to feel the effects of the edibles come on again. Now, the real reason that I started using cannabis for performance is because I had suffered some pretty bad concussions. And I wasn't really able to train for a good period of time after I fought in China. So I really had to kind of relearn a lot of stuff. I really had to start slow. I wasn't allowed to do any impact. So it became a lot of shadow boxing and just being on my own, not being with my team. So what really happened was I just started smoking and going outside and shadow boxing. And that's when I really learned about how it could affect my movement, how I was able to relax more. And I know that kind of sounds weird for a martial art, but the calmer I can remain in a martial art while I'm fighting, the better fighter that I am. So it kind of helps remove some of it from my head, some of the, the tension, the anxiety. Now, the real kind of proof is playing with the difference in milligrams. So you can't kind of consume what you would at night during your daytime kind of practice. So I would start very, very low. I'm talking like 2 to 5 milligrams. And what I would take at night would probably be over 100. So it is a massive difference. But how you are when you're awake is much different when you're just trying to rest on the couch. Now, I really found the way that it helped, the way that I trained, the way I was able to spar. Now, I wouldn't recommend that people eat edibles and try to spar. It isn't, your hand-eye coordination isn't exactly what it should be. You are able to get out of your head a little bit, but no, I do believe that sparring while on any sort of cannabis won't work well for everybody. So it is about how you kind of, how you start, what your tolerance is already like. That kind of stuff.
But it does work for you with just kind of low milligram count, like you are just
low milligram count. Absolutely. Now, would my coach argue with you? No, he knows that I'm a squirrely brained girl and that I need to get out of my head just a little bit. I wouldn't recommend it for competition day of, like small amounts, but I'm not talking massive consumption. No.
And what about getting punched in the face? How does that feel different when you're
getting punched in the face always sucks, man.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Sucks. Yeah, but yeah, like it's you are able to get out of your head just a little bit with it. Absolutely. Yeah.
What about your endurance level? Any difference?
I feel that while on cannabis, I'm not able to hit the kind of shitty part of training. I do find that, like, if I'm starting a run or if I'm starting something like that, like I'm not as kind of complaining about what I have to do. I do find a little bit more effort and a little bit more grit when it comes to cannabis. It's just like people that are smoking weed to clean their house, or like people do use it as a bit of a energy stimulant, I guess, even though typically in stigma wise, it isn't that for that. But I do believe it makes my runs better. I do believe that I skip longer to it. I do believe my shadow boxing is more fluid, for sure.
Yeah, I like to smoke a little weed and go to the gym and lift weights. Like, I really like to get in the zone there. It really helps me focus and get some good music. Of course, the music is important. You have to have music in your ears. But when I get the right music and smoke a little weed, I can lift for hours. Doctor, is there any kind of science behind this? Is cannabis, does it help endurance? Does it help you, your hand-eye coordination? Is there anything scientific that you can contribute to this?
Yeah, so I do want to say that with running, I am by no means an elite runner, but I was training for a marathon, and cannabis before my runs always tended to, I mean, I wasn't like cracking personal bests every time that I would smoke before I ran, but it would always make the run a little bit more enjoyable and a little bit easier to get up and actually do it. So there's this study, to your question, there's this study done in 2011, and it was looking at very specific sports like archery and shooting and things like that. And it found that there were, at least the study suggested that there were anxiolytic, so anxiety reducing, and also perceptual enhancements that that helped, that provided an advantage to like archers and shooters and things like that. So it might be a little bit counterintuitive thinking about, you know, hand-eye coordination, slow reaction time, things like that. But it actually found that these archers were a bit more accurate for some reason. They were able to zone in maybe. Now, I feel like I say this every panel, but you know, we really do need much more research. That's you know, part of the problem. Like Mike was saying, is that, you know, the research really isn't as robust as it should be. But some of these studies, you know, they are showing that, you know, there is no there's no studies that show that cannabis is a performance decreaser or performance inhibitor. You know, there are small studies that say a little bit of everything, but there's no real large clinical trial to suggest that cannabis inhibits physical performance at all. Even though I don't know if down here in South Florida, one of the like, there's a bus system, and like there's this huge propaganda ad on the side of the bus that says how cannabis can hinder your athletic ability. And I'm every time I see it, I'm just shaking my head. I'm like, where's that data? Who, you know, where can I find that? Because anecdotally, with the patients, the ex-NFL athletes that I talked to, with my own experience, even playing high school sports, we used to be high during football practice. Yeah. And you know, no drop off in athletic performance. So
well, my own experience doing that, my junior year, I did consume some cannabis before practice, and I practiced fine. But my senior year, one day I smoked weed with my buddy and went to practice, and I dropped every single pass that came my way. And I was like, what is going on? I'm not doing that anymore. So I never smoked weed before football ever again, but I was a swimmer. I was a competitive swimmer, and for swimming, for repetitive motion type of thing, it was great, because I felt like a dolphin under there. I was just like, this is awesome. And I could practice hard, and, you know, I felt like I was exerting myself and working really hard, and I was really into it. Doctor, if you could come up with your own, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but you're talking about a lack of data and research and studies. If you could come up with your own study, what would it be?
Yeah, so there were some studies done like in the 70s that looked at certain metrics like forced vital capacity. So that's how deep of a breath you can take and how much you can exhale within 1 second. I'm sure you guys had to do these kind of tests and stuff like that. Maximum work capacity, things like that. And they were really small studies, and you know, the evidence was kind of not so conclusive, but I would do a test like that, looking at certain metrics, like looking at your maximum lifting, or you know, running speed, hand-eye coordination. I would do it with elite athletes. In this study, I don't think they used elite athletes. I think they just used weekend warriors. And the amount that they consumed, it was a strain with like 1.7% THC. So it wasn't even analogous to how we're consuming cannabis in real life. So I would love to see a study that takes into account making sure that we're talking about doses that people actually use. And instead of having a control group that's not taking the cannabis and the experimental group that's on the cannabis, I'd want to see that test done with the same people on cannabis and not on cannabis, and then you can really compare the difference in their performance.
I'd love to see that. Mike, so you played NFL running back at the highest level in the world, and you said that you discovered cannabis and it helped you recover. Were you using it at all before practice or before games or anything like that? And what was your experience in the league? Were any of the guys doing that? Were they talking about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, all the above. I mean, I used it. Running the ball, it's a little, I mean, to me, it's a little different than any other position. No disrespect to any other position, but I mean, it's like an art, you know. So I had to be in the right mindset. I had to be in the right artistic mode to be able to run the ball and do the things that I need to do as a running back. So all the above. I used it before practice, before games, just at the level I needed to get me where I needed to be. friends of mine, they did use it. From my experience, guys, I know guys that use it and play better than me and play longer than me, you know. So, from my experience, it has been something that aided elite athletes in being able to do their job at a very high level.
And what about now? Are you still working out? What are you doing to stay in shape? Is cannabis still a part of that repertoire?
Yeah, so right now I'm more like, since I retired, I'm more like a wellness program. I
Mm.
do cognitive behavioral therapy, vestibular therapy, and as well as cannabis, try to get my sleep and try to diet well and things like that. So now trying to implement my own wellness program where I don't work out as strenuous anymore just because, the body is not where it used to be. But, to be able to get my daily activity done, I do certain activities, yoga and other rehab activities to make sure I'm able to function properly.
Angelina, I want to talk a little bit about your injuries and the common injuries that you see in your field and how cannabis may have helped that. Can you kind of go through some of the injuries you faced and how cannabis might have helped you recover?
I've had a hairline fracture in my leg. I've broken my orbital bone from taking a spinning back elbow to my face. I've had multiple concussions. I've broken every toe and every finger.
Wait, hold on. Every toe and every finger?
Yeah.
Oh my God. So what happens when you do break a toe or a finger? Do you cast it or are you just like, that's fine, just rub some dirt on it?
No, you put tape on it and you keep going. Yeah.
So if I were to put your hands under an X-ray machine, it would just look like a big mess.
I think, yeah, I had my feet X-rayed and she was like, "How many times have you broken your feet?" I'm just like, "I've never been cast." So yeah, we just keep going.
Yeah. So the cannabis clearly helps you recover from those. Do you think it helps you recover faster than if you weren't using it?
I don't believe that it helps you recover faster, but I just do believe that it kind of will help to take your mind off any of the issues. I do believe that it helps with the inflammation in your body. But for myself, most of all, like besides any of the pain, I think it really just helps to, and I'm sure Dr. Joshua again can speak on it better than I can, but I do believe it helps to lower your cortisol level issues. And that's kind of what stressed me out the most was the pain that I felt and the exhaustion that really came from the whole thought process that we just need to train harder, keep going, no days off, that whole mentality. When as I became a bit of an older fighter, I really realized that it was more about the recovery process, which was more important. So I had to do things like smoke more weed and get in the recovery tanks and really take care of myself so that I was able to go back and do the recovery or do the training properly. But it did take a long time for me to come back from those injuries, but it was really about the rest and the just slowing it down a bit. And so once I slowed it down, I was able to train a lot better.
How is cannabis viewed in Muay Thai in general, in the kind of the Muay Thai community worldwide?
I think it's interesting because, like, for myself, I've never been tested for cannabis because of fighting in Asia and Mexico. They weren't testing, so that was great. But it's just really about. I feel that everyone is using it. Everyone is using edibles to heal. Everyone in Canada, especially, smoking to recover, smoking for performance. But when you go to Asia, I can talk to any of the foreigners there about what they're doing for cannabis usage, how they're using it to recover. But if you try to talk to any of the Thais, they still really have a bad stigma. And it kind of belongs with cocaine. Now they have just like legalized for recreational and medical, but I think it will take a long time for the kind of stigma to go down. Whenever I tried to talk to any of the coaches in Thailand, they wouldn't even have a conversation with me about it. So.
And when did you start using cannabis? Did you discover it when you were young, when you were in high school?
I smoked weed and hash through high school, but once I started doing Muay Thai in 2005, I wasn't smoking at all. And it was about 10 more years until I started smoking again. So I've been making cookies now for about 8 years. And I'm now 17 years into my Muay Thai career. So, yeah.
17. Can you talk a little bit about your favorite cookie that you like to make and what goes in it? What are the ingredients?
Excuse me 1 second.
She's gonna get
I'm gonna get the cookie. So I made today. These are oatmeal chocolate chip peanut butter cookies.
yummy.
So I did a lot of research. These are made with kief. So you're getting a full spectrum cookie. Now these were vegan, but they're not anymore because grass-fed butter is kind of the way that I like to go. But these are not legal. These are made for myself and my friends. So these are sitting at 50 milligrams, which is actually 5 times the legal amount that we can actually produce in Canada. So our legal limit in Canada is 10 milligrams.
Per cookie.
Per cookie, per packaged item. We can't package more than 10 milligrams.
Dr. Joshua, how do you recommend how many milligrams for someone to take? Because Angelina was just talking about how she'll take 100 milligrams for better or whatever.
Yeah.
I would end up like in a really weird place if I did that. Like it wouldn't go well.
Same.
Yeah. So how
Same.
do you?
And
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to ask you about that. You know, dosage is so important. But I always tell patients, like especially new patients, you know, there's no fatal overdose when it comes to cannabis. You know, like you might get anxious, you might feel like you're going crazy, you might get really crazy munchies, but you'll fall asleep. But the great thing about cannabis is, if cannabis makes you fall asleep, you're always going to wake up from it, you know, and that's not the same for other medications, right? Generally, a good starting dose for most people is like 10 milligrams for edibles, right? So a 10 milligram dose is where I start most people. If they're completely cannabis naive, I'd say even start at 5. But I always recommend for first time people, take it before bed. You know, like don't try to take it during the day. It may be just way too much. So 100 milligrams sounds like a lot. I'm sure that you didn't just start there.
Oh, no, I definitely didn't just kind of hop onto that. And we kind of did a really cool experiment. So we taught a yoga class at one time, and we did a bunch of like vegan gluten-free treats for all the ladies. And we dosed them at 2.5 milligrams. So these women are not weed people. And you could see that they were slightly touched by these edibles. So like, I feel that anybody that doesn't have any experience with cannabis can feel anywhere from 2.5 to 5 milligrams. Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. But you know, like again, like because it's a safe thing, because we're not talking about fatal toxicity, fatal overdoses. You know, you can go as high as you need to, whatever works best for your body. So 100 milligrams is super appropriate for some people. Now, the other thing is combining CBD with THC. That can allow you to, especially if you take it in like a 1-to-1 ratio or 2-to-1 ratio with more CBD than THC, that can allow you to take more THC without getting some of those, you know, possibly negative effects that some people do experience with THC, like the anxiety and things like that. So, you know, taking them both together, I recommend for everybody.
Yeah, you always hear the horror stories of somebody, you know, stumbling upon some cookies that they just think are normal cookies in someone's house, and like eating 3 cookies and then ending up in a really weird place. Is it true that CBD is an antidote for too much THC? Like if you have too much THC, you take the CBD and it kind of brings you back down?
Yeah, it is the antidote. I'll tell you this though, it is so, in my experience, it works better for that kind of uneasy, anxious effect. For me personally, if I have too much of an indica, there's no coming back for that. The antidote for that is a nap. But yeah, like you know, taking a little bit too much and you're just feeling a little bit uncomfortable or jittery, yeah, CBD is an amazing antidote. And I think the best way to consume it in that situation is probably sublingual, like so the drops that go under your tongue, you know, it'll take effect in like 10 to 15 minutes. So the best thing you can do is if you know how much THC you took, just try to take at least that much CBD or more. Because again, there's no risk of toxicity here. So yeah, take twice as much CBD as you did THC, and watch the anxiety go away.
Watch the anxiety just melt away, right?
Just melt away.
So when you do smoke some, especially some sativa, your heart rate increases, right?
Yes.
Are there any difficult, like some kind of pesky contraindications with like caffeine, for example? If you're gonna smoke some sativa and drink some coffee, are you at risk of having a nervous breakdown?
Yeah, so I think it's on a case by case basis. Again, there's no, not that I'm aware of, any data kind of showing that combining caffeine and cannabis is harmful at all. But if that is something that somebody experiences, I would recommend just kind of make some space between the caffeine and the cannabis. Usually, the increase in heart rate that you see isn't going to it's not going to make a huge difference. It's not going to put you at risk for anything. But if you are, if you have a pre-existing heart condition, a murmurs, an arrhythmia, something like that, and then you increase your heart rate to a level that's higher than it should be, or you're taking caffeine, or you're exercising really strenuously, then you can potentially see some issues there. But for the majority of people, it's not going to increase your heart rate to a point where it's dangerous at all.
Mike, so ever since you came out supporting cannabis and filed your therapeutic use exemption, you've been all over the news. You've had a lot of exposure. You've had a lot of opportunities to talk and stuff like that, and you've been met with a lot of positive feedback. Have you met any resistance at all from the establishment, from people you talk to? Have people been open to your message?
The only resistance I had was from the league. And then from there, I mean, the public and everyone else, I was amazed at, how many other people were going through what I was going through just in a regular workplace, where they just didn't have access to the proper medicine, and their workplace or the constraints they was under wasn't allowing that. So, I received just amazing love from the public. And it was, only pushback I got from anyone was from the league.
And so do you think that effectively ended your career, kind of taking that stand, or were you basically done? Were you ready to be done?
Well, I had a lot of concussions. Like I said, I was playing on a lot of injuries, and I wasn't allowed to be able to use the proper medicine to be able to do what I needed to do. So unfortunately, with that cocktail together, I wasn't able to continue my football career. The doctors deemed me disabled. They deemed me not able to play anymore. So they ended my career, and I got into a now career of hopefully trying to advance and change and help lives.
So how does your head feel now after all those concussions?
Well, I mean, I manage it, but it feels like shit. I mean, if it hurts most of the time, but I manage it, for the most part.
So you were talking about some of these ways that you manage it. Cannabis, of course, is one. Yoga, some other things you mentioned. Can you go a little bit deeper in ways that people can manage concussion and brain injuries?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physician. I just been
but for you personally,
around. Yeah, me personally, meditation has helped me a lot. Being able to get in spaces where I'm happy, taking time and things for myself, being able to get in a structure each and every day, that has helped me with my anxiety and my headaches, knowing what I'm going to do and having a kind of plan for attacking that, and knowing how to deal with, panic attacks and those things when they come about. That has helped me. So I would say meditation has been the biggest component to me having some type of synergy when it comes down to dealing with anxiety and headaches and other injuries that I've had.
So when you talk about meditation, can you lay that out for me? How many, what does that look like? How many minutes do you have to sit down? You close your eyes. What does it look like?
Well, when I first got into meditation, it was very hard. I mean, I just couldn't rest my mind. I couldn't sit down for a second. And now I got into different ones within walking meditation and, get into a quiet room, laying down, turning off all my devices, getting away from, really is me unwinding and detaching myself from the things that usually compile my mind. So, it could look different for anybody, but for me, it's getting in a quiet room, taking a quiet walk, turning off all devices, getting away from Instagram and emails and phone calls and television and those things, and really trying to get one with myself and understand that. So Cannabis has helped. Like I said, vestibular behavioral therapy has helped me, and also I've been, had an opportunity to get educated on psilocybin and those things, other natural medicines, and that has helped me as well.
You want to talk a little bit about the psilocybin and what that's done for you, or don't want to get into that?
Well, I mean, I can speak from it personally. Like I say, I'm
That's all. That's all I'm
learning.
asking. I know you're
Yeah,
not a doctor.
educate myself as I go. But I mean, it's helped
Yeah.
me tremendously with my trauma. One thing that I didn't say earlier was NFL players are 4 times more likely to become dependent on a opiate. So
Yeah.
with that being said, and with me being a child of substance abuse, my father was on crack cocaine my whole life, in and out of prison. So I was at a higher chance to become addicted to an opiate. So, now getting into a new frame of mind and using more natural medicines. I was introduced to psilocybin by my lawyer, Brian Marescu. He penned a book on it, The Immortal Key. He spoke on Joe Rogan about it as well. And it really has helped me with my trauma. It's really given me the chance to open my mind up, to be more accepting to new things, to be more accepting to change in my life in ways that I never thought. Even just being able to go back and think of things in my childhood, think of things that happened to me in the league, and be able to process those things now in the future has helped me so much. So I can't speak on all the things that it's doing psychologically, but I can say, just like cannabis, as soon as I got my hands on it, it helped me tremendously.
That's beautiful. Thank you for
There,
sharing that.
there is actually there is a lot of good data, talking about how psilocybin can help with anxiety, depression, PTSD, and all of that stuff. So whether you're taking it in a moderate dose or a micro dose, I think it's a great tool in addition to all those other things that you're doing.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
Doctor,
absolutely.
I want to talk on something that Mike was alluding to about getting away from the devices and that kind of exacerbating some head injuries and stuff like that. Is there some science to that some of our I don't know, our brain trauma or depression, things like that, anxiety can get triggered by all these devices we're dependent upon?
Yes, absolutely. So the thing that happens, like we can really get addicted to our devices. It's all a chemical thing. We open up our Instagram, we see the likes, or we see a picture that we like, and we get that flood of dopamine, and it starts to set up this reward cycle, this want and then reward cycle, where you're feeling a little down, you want a quick boost, you pick up your phone, and then you start to become dependent on that phone. And then when you start to get anxiety when you're not with your phone, because it becomes if you're in your head that much, it becomes like, here's an easy source of a little bit of feel good, and I'm such a huge fan of meditation. I do it every day, and I agree, Mike, it can look so many different ways. To me, meditation is just about being present. It's just about being, it's not about shutting off your mind from thinking, because that's what minds do. They think, but it's being able to realize when you're thinking and understand that you don't always have to be thinking or always have to be doing something. So meditation has actually helped me to spend less time on my devices, because when you're present, when you're sitting in the silence, when you're being still, when you're just being, you don't need, like, you're at peace, right? And you don't need that dopamine boost from looking at your phone, so I what do they call it, the death scroll, when you're just scrolling down Instagram, right? And it's just new images, things for you to process, things for you to think about. I'm jealous of this person. I'm mad at this person. Just so many different thoughts. All of that is so triggering of anxiety. Taking a break from that and just being still for a little bit is a great antidote for that.
Angelina, do you have thoughts on this? Meditation, anxiety, depression, social media, things like that?
The doom scroll, yeah, absolutely. No, I think meditation has been I don't know if you guys know what's going on in Canada. We are still locked down. We're still locked down. So the anxiety
everywhere in Canada.
So we can't go into a restaurant at this point. You can go and get food for takeout, but we can't go to the gym. we can't be in groups more than 10, I believe. Like it's not good here. So I believe that the anxiety and depression that's going on in our country is massive. Psilocybin has absolutely saved my life over the last year, I would say, stopping panic attacks. But I think it's just going to be about like soothing the soul. Like the sensory deprivation tank, I'm going to mention it again, has just been a lifesaver, because it is hard for me to shut my brain off into the meditation. I do time every morning, but it's not as long as I would like it to be. But I really feel that once we can connect a little bit more as humans again, that things will hopefully calm down as far as the social media and as far as the fear and everything that's kind of being spread right now. So I think
it's really
kind of come
difficult
together on that subconscious level. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, you're talking about isolation, and so your only form of connection could be this thing right here. And so the temptation to get into it and feel like that's what's going to be your savior is really powerful. And yeah, it does take a balanced mind to step away from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a difficult place.
So anything else you guys want to touch on? Anything that I've talked about that kind of has sparked any thoughts? And we've talked about cannabis for, performance, recovery, fitness. We talked about psilocybin. Any other plant medicines that you guys have experienced that you want to touch on real quick? We got another 5 or 10 minutes or so. Dr. Joshua, any experiences you've had with patients who've had any good luck with other plant medicines?
Well, I really, not so much. I might not be the person to speak on it. But yeah, I mean, definitely the cannabis and the psilocybin. But the one thing I did want to mention before we move away from like the sports and performance and everything, a lot of time when we think about sports and performance, we're thinking about NFL athletes and, fighters, Muay Thai fighters, MMA, stuff like that. But one group of people of elite athletes that doesn't get maybe talked about as much as they should are people like athletes with physical limitations, like Paralympians and things like that. A lot of times those people are suffering from some sort of spinal cord injury, or some sort of neurogenic thing if they had to be amputated. So cannabis for them has such a great benefit because, they're not only are sometimes they dealing with the same kind of pain that other athletes are dealing with, fully able-bodied athletes, but they're also dealing with other medical conditions that could hinder them from performing at an elite level. So I found an interesting article. They kind of mentioned, athletes with, and not just not fully able-bodied athletes, but athletes with other medical conditions, fibromyalgia, for example. Those people really do benefit from the therapeutic effects of cannabis.
They might need it more, right? And so the question is like, how do you make those inroads into their lives and explain it to them in a way that doesn't trigger them or trigger the people that are in their lives helping them train? I think that's a delicate topic, right? Okay, guys. Well, I think that's gonna wrap it up for us. I want to thank everyone for joining us. This has been another Tru4Athletes Cannabis Education Series, sponsored by Trulieve. We want to thank Trulieve. We want to thank Athletes for Care. We want to thank Angelina Blessed. We want to thank Dr. Joshua Moore. We want to thank Mike James. You guys are awesome. Thank you for contributing those stories, those thoughts and ideas. Hopefully we've all learned from them. I'm Nate Jackson, and we'll see you next time. See ya.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Bye.
All right, guys. Good stuff.